My grandmother used to say when white people get a cold, black people get pneumonia. And so I thought, if white people are getting the plague, what in the hell are we going to get? One of the misconceptions around HIV and AIDS is that it's one size fits all, and nothing could be further from the truth. AIDS is specific for every community, and that's particularly true in black communities.
HIV is just a symptom of some of these social issues that we have yet to address as a community or as a country.
Racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, police brutality.
Everything from poverty to lack of education, access to education and gainful employment.
Housing issues, transportation issues, access to health care, equal access to health care.
And a lot of times when we look at why people aren't engaging in care, it's also because they don't feel reflected, right?
Overall in this country, there's certainly not enough black doctors and black educators, and that's a systemic failure.
Medical mistrust is a part of a larger problem around institutional mistrust, which exists and is justified by the way the institutions treat us. Now, so medical mistrust is connected to police brutality. Medical mistrust is connected to redlining. Medical mistrust is connected to voter suppression.
All these issues intersect. And it's not like we can just sort of pick and choose, or we can turn things on, turn things off.
And so you couple that trauma on top of, and you need to practice safe sex, and you need to take PrEP, but if you take PrEP, you have to check in monthly with your doctor. It's a lot. And so I think sometimes people just give up, like, how much can you handle? And in some ways, it may be that you are aware that you're about to have risky sex, and you don't care because you don't matter in this world.
Part of my journey was admitting some of that for myself. I had issues of my own self-worth.
There are people in the community that I knew who I grew up with who were like, well, I'm just gonna live my life to the fullest right now, because at the end of the day, we're all gonna get HIV and we're gonna die.
We haven't even gotten out of the mode of survival yet into just living. And unfortunately, that often causes us to assimilate.
To be considered to be an upstanding citizen, you must present yourself as someone who is righteous and morally upright.
Anything that makes you feel othered isn't welcome.
We don't talk about sexuality. We don't talk about the addict in the family.
What goes on in this house stays in this house.
And so if somehow you find yourself infected or affected by HIV and AIDS, that is a blight on you. It is a scarlet letter.
The stigma is living and breathing in the community every day.
It's not as if HIV and AIDS is seen as a health crisis. It's seen as, something that you should feel shame about.
The other piece is that the black church in the black community across the world is a place of foundation and groundedness.
Whether you go to church or not, you are influenced by the traditional black church of the United States.
The information those churches received was flawed information. Once we're really able to establish the truth of what HIV and AIDS was, there were a huge number of examples of where black churches rose to the occasion. There are more than a few examples, of course, where black churches failed.
They question my suitability. Do you think you ought to be here praying on the rug? Like being a person that with HIV would contaminate the mosque in some kind of way. And that really hurt. That hurt me in a really, really deep place.
I was less worried about the fact that a doctor a few years ago told me I had 9 years to live, but I was worried about how people would see me. Would they think I was gay? Would they think I was using drugs or needles?
And unfortunately, stigma prevents a lot of people from accessing healthcare. They don't go to the community-based organizations.
You may know someone sitting at the desk, or they may know someone in your family, and someone tends to leak someone's visitation or someone's status, and it causes great trouble and great distress for people. And so as a result, they drop out of care or they don't engage in care. My story started about 35 years ago.
When at 27, I was diagnosed with HIV, I was terrified.
I went from college freshman, All-American, to dead man walking.
I did not know another person living with HIV, living with AIDS. I did not know of how to get myself engaged in care. I was very isolated.
It was devastating as a woman, and it was a secret that I kept for a minute.
And my life was just racked with fear, with guilt, shame.
In 1986, my life, I thought I was gonna die. I was gonna die.
I am one of the Lazarus stories. Literally, I was on my deathbed. The doctors called my mother and had given me less than 24 hours to live.
I'm the last stander. My brother died first, his partner died, and then my partner died the following year. We started out in 1986, and by 1996, I was the last person alive.
There was a point in the pandemic where they talk about the changing face of the AIDS pandemic, and that always made me crazy because the face of AIDS didn't change. No, white people in the media finally got the memo. People started to look at the data. We were always there. We were always disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And for the most part, we were always there in the fight against the pandemic.
Where I'm from in Oakland, Dr. Robert Scott started AIDS Project of the East Bay in 1983, a year after San Francisco AIDS Foundation was started. Dr. Scott looked in his backyard in Oakland and said, well, there are black men that I'm seeing in my clinic, and they're not getting the same information that the white guys in San Francisco are getting.
Organizations like the Black AIDS Institute, founded by Phil Wilson, really put a laser-like focus on black people.
You could go across the country and look at black activism that was not making it to, NBC or the front page of the New York Times.
Much of the activism that the press focused on and others focused on were from the white gay male community.
These white men had the opportunity to have their stories told because they had access to resources and communication channels that allowed them to have their story told.
The lack of attention to race, it slowed down a response in black communities that allowed HIV and AIDS to take a foothold that did not need to happen.
It's because there was a head start, and it feels like there's always a head start. That's what white privilege is. It's a head start.
So here we are 40 years into the epidemic, and we see that the communities that are disproportionately impacted are the Black and Latinx community.
The rate of HIV among Black people and African Americans is 8 times higher than that of white people.
CDC data show that if we don't make a change, soon 1 in 2 young black gay men will be living with HIV.
The group that has the fastest rates of diagnosis in the United States is black women, cisgender women who are contracting and or living with HIV at the same rate or even higher rates than black gay men.
And we look at trans people. We see that trans men are falling further behind than their cis counterparts. And then when we look at trans women, and more specifically Black trans women, depending on where you are in the country, about 62% of Black transgender women will have an HIV diagnosis in her lifetime.
That is pandemic level, and it is something that is not really talked about that much publicly.
That reality continues today.
I was diagnosed in April 2014.
When I first found out, I did not think that it was a death sentence. In fact, I was told, this is not a death sentence.
And even with all the education that's out there, when you first test positive, you still think you're gonna die. Like that's the first, okay, so when am I gonna die? How long do I have?
When I found out I had HIV, I was well knowledgeable about it because my mother worked in the nursing field for like 30 years. So I knew what it was like on the outside, but living with is a whole nother journey.
No one's ever gonna love me. I'm never gonna have another relationship. If I have a baby, I'm gonna kill my baby.
My parents are gonna be disappointed. I might get kicked out of the church. There's all kinds of things that could happen, and all kinds of things do happen.
I decided I needed to tell my family.
In 1988, I had to tell my mom and dad.
I called my grandmother on the phone. My grandmother raised me from a tot, so she's my mother.
And I was like, Mom, I have something to tell you. And I said, I'm HIV positive. Crickets.
And my mother didn't take it too good.
She was super disappointed. She was super disappointed. It was just like, oh, I thought you were cleaner than that. What were you doing? I knew that this was gonna happen. Like everything you could think of, she was saying.
She had me to eat off of plates, paper forks. That was hurtful because I was my mom. Mothers aren't supposed to reject or feel that way towards their child.
She said, you're not sick. We come from a family of fighters, and if you let this kill you, I will be very disappointed with you.
And she said, what took you so long to tell me? And I said, I was ashamed. And she just hugged me.
No one understood who I was or the pain that stigma created other than my mother.
For this epidemic, men open the door. Men open the door on the advocacy, on the activism, but what I'm clear about is that it will be the women who close the door on this epidemic, because once women own it, we change things. And when we change things for everybody.
Black women are in the forefront of all of the fights, all the social ills. Go to any AIDS walk. It's almost a black woman's convention.
Trans women have been amazing. Trans women put their lives on the line, and they're often the loudest voices, not just for trans issues, right?
What got me through this journey is the women before me. The women that stepped in these shoes before me. They guided me to where I'm at today, even through all my hardships. They was there for me.
I got connected with Sister Love. Sister Love lifted me up. That gave me that strength to know that me being HIV positive, me being HIV positive was no longer fearful in my life. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was not afraid. I became a warrior.
HIV activists are among the fiercest because they are people who have dealt with their own internalized HIV stigma. Combine that with being Black, you get yourself a pretty powerful activist who's not afraid of anyone or anything and willing to take on all the systems that need to be taken on.
We may not have been present on the TV screens, but we were taking care of community, right? That's what Black folks do. It's like, okay, we don't have what they have. Let's figure out how to get it in our communities. Let's figure out how to take care of ourselves.
Somebody has to do it, and I just happen to be one of those that are chosen to do this thing.
I am a Black gay man and I'm HIV positive, but there's power for me to tell that. It's liberation for me to be able to tell that story.
It's part of my journey.
And a calling.
To share, to help, to love.
To help save the lives of our sisters and brothers.
I lived it. Lived it alone, lived it in pain, lived it in depression, lived it in hurt, lived it in fear, lived it and learned, lived it and came out of it, lived it and conquered it, lived it and defeated it, lived it and looked victorious in it. I lived it. I'm HIV positive.